My name's Colin Ledbetter. This is the Built Different podcast, and I'm here in studio with Kate. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Kate. I worked at the Sheriff's Department for about 2 years, and I now work for a financial institution. I am a cybersecurity engineer, so making that transfer over from law enforcement to the corporate world has been a little different, but I've enjoyed it.
Okay.
It's been good.
You worked for which Sheriff's Department?
St. Charles County.
Okay. Walk us through kind of your daily duties when you were there.
So I was mostly at the courthouse. We would check people in. We would screen people, making sure that they didn't have anything that they weren't supposed to. Sometimes I would go out on the road and with one of my best friends who actually works there, we would serve papers, we'd ex parte removals, subpoenas, just different stuff like that.
What were kind of the do's and don'ts that you learned early on? I'm sure from senior deputies and stuff that were there, they probably taught you kind of the ropes and things. What were some of those things?
Probably making sure you're always confident in your decision and to make sure that if you didn't know what you were talking about, to just don't say anything.
Yeah.
And the don'ts, just don't mess up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in law enforcement. I think some of the younger cops, they come on and they think that they have to act every time and they have to do and don't, and they kind of get caught in some of that stuff. And a lot of times it's better just to shut up and let things kind of unfold, and sometimes even let some of the senior officers take over and do it. So that's a good point. So working there, you said you worked there for about 2 years. You said, okay. What were some of the favorite things that you got to do? As far as did you like being in the courtroom, or did you what else?
Being in the courtroom was actually really fun because you got to hear the problems that these people have, and it's they make my problems seem as if they're not as bad.
Yeah.
And then I did like being out on the road. That was probably one of my favorite parts to do.
Was there a specific day that you guys went out on the road and did stuff, or was it just kind of sporadic? Because I know like my hometown, I think my county that I'm in, they have a specific day where they go out and hey, this is eviction day, or that's just kind of. But I didn't know if that's how they went or.
No, it's just whatever their assignments that they get for that day.
Okay.
Is what they actually.
Kind of what the judges ruled on here recently. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, walk me through kind of what you do now as opposed to what you did, the differences, I guess.
So now, instead of being out on the road and assessing a threat out on the road and preventing something from happening, I'm doing that in a corporate world now. So I'm hiding behind a computer. I don't have people that see me and they want to hurt me or whatever. I'm hidden behind a computer, and we assess threats that come in and out of the company. We are in charge of setting exceptions for different controls within the company, and just different stuff like that.
Okay. So with your 2 years of experience at St. Charles, what are some of the things that you would like to tell not only younger officers coming on, but younger female officers coming into the profession? What would you tell them as they're starting out?
Make sure you enjoy the camaraderie that's there. That was something that I was taught at a very young age, as both of my parents were police officers, is to just make sure that instead of getting offended by something that someone says, just roast them back, because then they'll the guys that you do work with will kind of understand, okay, she's not really like a snowflake, but she can keep up and she can hold her own. Don't try to be the most baddest one out there. Just be yourself, and it's not a matter of who's the toughest one out there. It's just do your job and make sure you go home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that there has been in the past, and I think now with recent light and news and stuff, there's been a little bit of a disconnect between female officers in the job. Kind of enlighten us on that. Like, how does that make you feel as a former deputy, women in law enforcement? I mean, obviously, women can hold their own. I worked with a lot of great officers, so kind of enlighten us on how that makes you feel. And
it's very sad because not everyone is the same. I know if someone makes a comment that they had bad interactions with a female officer, and every interaction that they've had with a female officer, it's been bad, you kind of have to stop and think, what were you doing to have that person or that female officer pull you over?
Right.
I mean, that doesn't, if you have that many stories of getting pulled over, what that makes me, and I'm sure everybody else, think, why? Because people don't just get pulled over because they're bored. They're pulling you over because you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. So it's very sad to think that, because I know some female officers that I would have loved to have them back me up over certain guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So going forward, there's every officer kind of, when they get into their groove and stuff, they have a certain decompression method that they do after coming home from work. What was some of your things that you did?
The typical answer is going to the gym. I always made sure that was a priority, and I noticed that if I didn't do that and I wasn't religious with it, I would get really crabby.
Oh yeah.
And I just made sure I played soccer at least 2 or 3 nights a week. Sometimes I would play 2 or 3 games in one night, and I would do that for 2 or 3 nights for the whole week. So making sure you have a life outside of work and you have hobbies, I think, is very important.
Yeah.
And you can do whatever you want to do to decompress, but that was mine. I felt like I could just go in there and not think about anything other than what I was doing. I also tried hot yoga at one point.
Okay.
And that was probably the first time where I was sitting in a room and my brain was not spinning and I wasn't thinking about anything, because as women, our brains never shut off.
Yeah.
It's no matter what we are doing.
Yeah. So walk me through how your work week. So each department is different. Like at St. Louis, sometimes you would work 5 days in a row for 8 hours, and then other days you would work 7 days in a row. How was there kind of a set schedule at St. Charles, or was it all different times?
It was normal hours. I would do 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I never worked on the weekends unless we had hospital posts where we had to sit down and sit on someone at the hospital. But usually it would be 7 to 3 or 8 to 5 or 7:30 to 4:30. It kind of just depended how the day was going. If we had task force nights, sometimes I would work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., go home or go to the gym for a couple hours, then go back into work at 9 p.m., work till 3 a.m., turn back around and do the same thing 2 nights in a row. That was a little rough.
What were some of your favorite days, favorite parts of the job?
One day in particular, one of my favorite parts was we had a guy who I've known since he was actually a cop with my mom. They partied together 40 years ago. He worked with me. He was a retired sergeant. and he worked at the sheriff's department as his retirement job. And he had an insane mustache, and everyone always commented on it. It was very legendary, and he's had that for, I think he said 30 years. He has not shaved it, and it was his 60th birthday, and I bought a mustache balloon and fake mustaches, and I gave them to some of my coworkers, and we surprised him on his birthday with
or mustaches. I like that.
There was another time when my best friend and we were leaving with the one that I worked with. We were leaving our Christmas party, and I was pulling up to a stop sign. We were in normal clothes. I just was in my personal car, and we pulled up to the stop sign, and all of a sudden I felt this big movement in my car. I can't even describe what it was. And she looked at me and she was like, "What was that?" And I'm like, "What did you do?" So we're like sitting there blaming each other for it. And I happened to get out of the car to look on the passenger side. The wheel got caught in the sewer drain that was in the road. You know, the sewer drain is supposed to be like this. It was tilted, and my car got caught in it. And she had to push my car out as I had to put it in reverse. That was it was one of those, you kind of had to be there, but
it's funny you say that. I have one like the same kind of same story. I was very new. I had just got off of field training, and the guy that I was riding with, I won't name drop him, but he actually doesn't work for the department anymore either. But we had kind of just like the first month started riding together, and I was driving that day, and we're driving down an alleyway, and I don't remember. We were looking for a specific person, and we saw the guy, and he started running. And as soon as he started running, I started driving down this alleyway, and we ran over a tire, and it got drug up in the front bumper, and it the front kind of got locked up a little bit, and I was able to turn out of it, and we kept chasing the guy. We ended up getting him. But the crazy part was that when we got out, the bumper was like completely hanging off. And department protocol says that we write a crash report and do all that stuff. We were able to get zip ties, and we zip tied the bumper back on. It was an old enough car that, you know, no one probably, I mean, no one ever found out. But
that is so funny.
Now that I'm not a part of the department anymore, I can share that story and not worry about it.
I'm sure they looked at it and they're like, this doesn't look right.
I don't even think that car's in service anymore. I mean, it was like an older Tahoe, probably like an 08 or 09 Tahoe at the time.
Gosh.
And this was probably 2019, so.
Yeah, it was an oldie.
Yeah, so it had like 200-some thousand miles on it, and it hardly moved. But yeah, it's funny, you know. But so, you know, we talked about some of the good times. What are some of the bad times that you've had on the job?
Probably one night, it was a task force night, and all the municipalities get together, and it's the auto theft task force. Everyone gets together and sits in a briefing room and goes over what we're looking for that night, what cars to be looking out for. It's usually the same speech every time. It's just different, cars. And one of the things that the captain would say before we went out is make sure you have a safe shift. And that had stuck with me. Well, that night, we got called to transport someone because that's the sheriff's department did on the task forces. They would transport the people that they pull over, people who had warrants, so they could get back out on the road and keep getting people. There were 5 officers that got hit on 270, and it wasn't a pursuit. It was a normal traffic stop. They were stopped in the fast lane, in the eastbound lanes, and it was like 26 minutes later, I think, a drunk driver came through and hit 5 of my guys. And I remember hearing it on the radio and just the screaming and the yelling, and I'll never get that out of my head. Luckily, they all survived. But that was probably one of the worst days. And then the days leading up to the debrief that we had on it, it wasn't even a debrief about what we could have done better. It was to get everyone in the same room and like it's okay to cry type of a thing. And I had never seen so many like grown men who had been police officers for 20, 30 years crying. Like it was
those debriefings. It's not, St. Louis City does not do this, and I've brought it up to majors and stuff like that, that they should. They're important. After Nate and I shooting, they had one I think it was 1 to 2 days afterwards, and it was literally just everyone coming together and, you know, discussing what happened and talking about it. And I think that there was a lot of light shined down on, because there was still so much craziness with our shooting, and there was a lot of like light shined down on like why these officers pulled up, or why they were there, or what exactly happened. So it's just, and it also, like you said, it's just a decompression time after major incidents, and I think it's definitely important.
I had some backlash from some of the guys at my department for that. They're like, there's no reason for you to be going to this debrief. And I was like, I showed up 4 minutes after it happened.
Right.
Granted, I didn't see any of the guys laying out. They had already shut down both sides of the highway. Helicopter was gone. They had already taken them all to the hospital. But you're still showing up in the energy and the thickness in the air of...
Yeah. There's something different in the air.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember it's like I had to justify myself as to why I wanted to go to that. And it's like, why wouldn't you? There were only 2 guys during the debrief that did not show up. One of them was out of town. I think the other one might have been sick. But it was like everyone was there.
Right.
It was...
It's important. I mean, it gives everyone time to vent and talk about what happened, and it definitely helps people, I feel like, process it, you know, because even days after, you can go after a major incident and not process things.
I think it's important days afterwards too. Like the next day, it's like got to be a week or so afterwards.
You got to sit down and you got to discuss it and let things, you know, just kind of flow out. So let's talk about kind of how, when you were in the job, it affected your home life. Like, what did you do outside of, you know, being a deputy? And then, like, how did that affect family relations and stuff like that? Did you get to see your family a lot, or?
So I still was living at home. And having a mom as a former police officer, I could easily go home and I could tell her about my day. And it wasn't just some random person that had no idea what I was talking about. She would either listen or she would give me advice. The dating life was very, I would say, difficult, because a lot of men not in as a first responder don't want anything to do with you. And so it's like you're naturally drawn to... You
either date a cop or...
a firefighter? Yeah, that was a thing.
That's rough, yeah.
I remember there was one guy that I was dating, and I really liked him, I wanted to date him, and he was like, no. He's like, I know what happens at police departments, and that hurt me, because I was like, I don't want you to think I would do anything like that, but the reputation with that is there's a very big... Dating in the PD world is very different. Yeah, so it's... now that I'm out of it, I actually am still dating my boyfriend, who is a police officer, but it's fine, because he can come home and tell me stories. I know everybody at his department, and he can come home and tell me stories, and I can relate to it. We can have fun. We have so much fun talking about his days. I mean,
you've got a unique perspective on that, of the fact that, you know, you have someone going out there and still doing that and coming home. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, how does that make you feel as the spouse, basically, you know, of him being out there doing that every day?
It's hard, but it's not hard, because I couldn't sit there and say, I don't want you to do it anymore, because that's not fair, and I would never say that. But as long as he is doing what he is supposed to be doing and not doing anything dumb to where he can come home at the end of the day. I know at one point he told me, he was like, if you ever feel like I'm becoming invincible, or if you think I'm doing something that I, shouldn't be, say something to me. And we've had a conversation about that where I was like, you are not invincible. Like, you now have someone you have to come home to, and you have to make better decisions.
Big deal. Yeah, you got to change it up.
But do I think he'll do it forever? I don't know. But as long as he's in it, I want him to be passionate about it, because I don't want him to get hurt.
Yeah.
And anything can happen anywhere. I mean,
oh yeah.
He can't sit there and say, oh, well, nothing's going to happen to me. It's like, it could be anything. You just never know.
Yeah, you don't. So wrapping up, I've asked this question a few times to different people. Would you recommend someone going into policing, especially like a close family or a close friend?
That's a doozy. I think if you have a passion for it, I think you should do it, because you don't ever want to have that. You don't want to have that what if. But it's kind of, at the end of the day, what are you willing to risk for a job that you don't have to go into?
Your heart's got to be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, do I think it's important for people to go into law enforcement? Kind of, because what I learned from being in there, who I was 2 years before I started, is not the same person I am now.
Yeah.
And I bet anybody else listening to this would probably say the same.
Yeah.
I think it makes you self-aware, and it makes you aware of your surroundings in the world, and that not everything is butterflies and rainbows, and there are very bad people out there.
Yeah.
So I almost think doing it as I don't want to say doing it as a learning curve, because you don't want to just do something to just do it and then leave. You should be passionate about it, but what I learned was just, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And the friendships that I made, and yeah, I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah. Well, Kate, thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.